Over the last few weeks, I've done a series of videos explaining and trying to demonstrate what Project 2025 is and what the Republicans and the MAGA planning on doing if they get Donald Trump or any conservative president in the White House in 2025. I've taken the liberty to combine all of those posts and put them in one video, as everyone need to be aware of the platform of the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, and MAGA in 2025. A lot of people have been talking about Project 2025, and not many people really know what's going on when you hear the words Project 2025. Project 2025 is a 920-page manifesto on how Republicans and conservatives plan on giving the president more power through all realms of government on day one, no matter if it's Trump or any Republican president, but they're hoping that it's Trump. And I've taken the time to read some of it. There are 4 pillared principles in which they want to implement this plan. Pillar 1. This volume puts in one place a consensus view of how major federal agencies must be governed, and where disagreement exists, brackets out these differences for the next president to choose a path. This is Pillar 1. Pillar 2 is a personnel database that allows candidates to build their own professional profiles and our coalition members to review and voice their recommendations. These recommendations will be collated and shared with the president-elect's team, greatly streamlining the appointment process. Pillar 2 is exactly what they said it is. It's like a website or some kind of database where all kind of conservatives, MAGA conservatives or whatever, can put their resumes into this database. And people that are above them, that are outside of them, can vet the database and say, okay, we want this person over here, we want that person over there. And then once those people outside of government say we agree with these people, they can then run that to the president's people and say, choose these people, put these people in these places. That way, everybody there is thinking the same way and not sabotage the rest of the agenda. Pillar 3 is the Presidential Administration Academy, an online educational system taught by experts from our coalition. For the newcomer, this will explain how the government functions and how to function in government. For the experienced, we will host in-person seminars with advanced training and set the bar for what is expected for senior leadership. Indoctrination. For those people that are already in the conservative mindset, we're going to put our newcomers into this program so we can indoctrinate them on what is in this playbook. For those who are already in the playbook, we're going to further enhance what they know by giving them more in-depth in-seminar briefs and trying to refresh what we want to implement within this playbook. It gets crazy. In Pillar 4, the playbook, we are forming agency teams and drafting transition plans to move out upon the president's utterance of "So help me God." As of the finishing of this book, they have put people in place and they're at the starting block. So once the president says, "So help me God," that's the sounding horn for them to implement this plan. That's how fast they're going to move on January 20, 2025. Within Project 2025, they want to hit the ground running. When the president says, "So help me God," they want to take action, but not necessarily on the president first. The first section is taking the reins of government. They want to attack the White House office, all the officers and people that surrounds the president. And one of them is the Office of the White House Counsel. They learned a lot with Trump's White House Counsel, Don McGahn, and executive privilege and all this other stuff. So this is what they say about the White House Counsel. While the White House Counsel does not serve as the president's personal attorney in non-official matters, it is almost impossible to delineate exactly where an issue is strictly personal and has no bearing on the president's official function. The Office of the White House Counsel, the White House Counsel, is for the presidency as an institution, not the president as a person. They understand that, but they're saying it's hard to delineate. It's not that hard because other presidents don't seem to have that problem, but Republican presidents do. The Office of the White House Counsel is the first line of defense for the executive office of the president. its staff must take seriously the duty to protect the power and privileges of the president from encroachments by Congress, the judiciary, and the administrative components of departments and agencies. And again, even though they want the office of the White House counsel to protect the presidency as a whole, they're still entrusting the office of the White House counsel to block everybody. Wouldn't they want the White House counsel and the executive office of the president work with Congress and other agencies and whatever? No. They look at all other entities of government as the enemy against the president. In addition to the White House counsel, the office includes deputies, assistants, associates, and legal support staff. The assistants and associate attorneys are often specialists in particular cases of the law and offer guidance to the EOP on issues related to national security, criminal law, environmental law, and a host of administrative and regulatory matters. They're not just talking about the White House counsel, they're talking about the staff around him and everybody that works within the office. And they went on in that previous statement to define who they were. Then they slam you with this. Subordinates should be deeply committed to the president's agenda and see their role as helping to accomplish the agenda through problem solving and advocacy. They should not erect roadblocks out of an abundance of caution. Rather, they should offer practical legal advice on how to promote the president's agenda within the bounds of the law. Deeply loyal to the president and not the Constitution. That's why I have the problem. Have you ever noticed how some people work at the White House just to get some credibility behind their name so they can go off to a law school or a law office or something like that? Well, they're stopping all of that. When you come into the new Project 2025 Republican White House, they want you already committed to staying there and finishing the job, not just trying to pad your resume. The White House counsel's office cannot serve as a finishing school to credential the next set of white shoe law firm attorneys or federal judges in waiting who cabin their opinions for fear their elite credentials could be tarnished through a policy disagreement. Rather, it should function more as an activist, yet ethical plaintiff's firm that advocates for its clients, the administration's agenda, within the limits imposed by the Constitution and the duties of the legal profession. They want the Office of Legal Counsel to be solely committed to doing everything within the legal means of protecting the president. They haven't mentioned anything about protecting the office of the president. They keep saying that's what the job is for, but then they go back and say those people that work there shall only be loyal to the president within the means of the law. As far as the White House office counsel himself or herself, here is how they define that person. Instead of choosing a specialist, the president should hire a counsel with extensive experience with a wide range of complex legal subjects. Moreover, while a candidate with an elite credential might seem ideal, the best one would be, above all, loyal to the president and the Constitution. They don't want just some lawyer who's good at the law and can give the president just some generic advice. They want somebody who's knowledgeable in the law, who can dance around the law, and loyal to the president and MAGA. One person in mind I can think of is someone like a Ted Cruz. That man folds like the wind. He will bend over backwards, even at the detriment of his own family. That man let Donald Trump talk about his family, and he still dyingly supports Donald Trump. And he's argued in front of the Supreme Court. So someone like a Ted Cruz, who's good with Congress, who's good with the Senate, who knows the Supreme Court, and loyal to Trump, you got your perfect candidate. That's who they want as a White House counsel. This whole section was just the White House and the White House counsel. I haven't got to all the other positions within the White House and within that area. Let's tackle Project 2025's First Lady role. Oh yeah, they've taken the time to even talk about what kind of First Lady they need to be in the White House. We all know that the First Lady can be a very valuable asset when it comes to the president, when it comes to social issues. There have been great First Ladies to come out and tackle social issues. Eleanor Roosevelt in the 1940s. There was Nancy Reagan in the 1980s when it came to her Just Say No to Drugs campaign. You had a lot of different First Ladies that tackle social issues. And at the same time, the First Lady's role can be tricky because in 1992, Bill Clinton was famously vilified for saying, if you elect me, you get in two for the price of one, because he felt like Hillary Clinton as his first lady was going to be a valuable partner. A lot of people didn't like that, to include conservatives. They even vilified him again in the 2016 campaign when they said, okay, well, if Hillary Clinton runs, they're going to have two for the price of one with Bill Clinton being there. And we don't want that. So the First Lady can be a tricky issue. Project 2025 wants to use the First Lady for the same things, but they've twisted it a little bit. The First Lady or First Gentleman plays an interesting role in the formation, implementation, and execution of policy in concert with the President. Active and interested first spouses often champion a select number of signature issues, whether they be thorny social issues or deeper policy issues. One advantage of the first spouses taking on hot-button social issues is that any political backlash would be less severe than it would be for the President. How many times did you hear the GOP and MAGA conservatives tell Michelle Obama to stay her ass out of politics or geopolitics or anything like that? How many times have you heard them tell Hillary Clinton to stay out of politics? How many times did they not go after Laura Bush when she was First Lady? Now they're saying, we understand what the role of the First Lady or First Gentleman is, and we're willing to capitalize on that now. Because guess what? If she tackles an issue that we want, but we put it on her, she'll get more blowback than the President. They want to throw their wives under the bus for their policy agenda. Let her go out there and field test it before we get behind it. The first spouse normally appoints a chief of staff who has enough assistants to support the spouse's activities in the East Wing of the White House. This group worked exclusively with the first spouse and senior members of the White House, along with EOP personnel, to implement and execute the first spouse's priorities, which reflect the first spouse's passions and interests and are often identified as important in discussions with the President. Executed well, they can be strategically useful in accelerating the administration's agenda. Past East Wing initiatives have focused on such issues as combating bullying, fighting drug abuse, promoting literacy, and encouraging physical education for young adults and children. The first spouse is afforded significant resources. His or her staff also works with the President's policy team, members of the cabinet, and other EOP staff. They now understand what a valuable asset the First Lady can be, because if they can't get her, they can get through her staff. Let her staff, the people that surround her, try to influence her, and also let her staff try to influence the executive office of the President's staff and let them coordinate between each other. In addition, if that First Lady or First Gentleman is especially concerned about a social issue or any kind of issue, that person can also speak to the President when they're in their home. But it all depends on the First Lady or First Gentleman. And if we get Melania back, they know she's not going to be interested in any social issues, so they can just use her staff. The people that I talked about before in Project 2025 were on the outskirts of the executive office of the President. Now we get into the actual office. And the first person on the chopping block is the President of the United States. They want to take the power of all the federal agencies and bring them back into the White House. Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution makes it abundantly clear that the executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. Okay. When George Washington in 1789, when he was sworn in as president, he said to himself, hey, yes, I have all the powers to make all of the decisions that's going to affect this country, but I don't have time to do all of this. So I need to put some people in place that can help me out. The cabinet was not created. George Washington created it. So what he said was, I can't deal with money on a regular basis, so let me get Alexander Hamilton, who I know can deal with money, and made him Secretary of Treasury. You know, I was the Commander-in-Chief, and I did win a war against a large British Navy and Army with just some ragtag troops, but I don't have time for regular Army stuff, so let me get Henry Knox to do the war stuff. And he became what is now the Defense Secretary. And you know what? We got to deal with France, England, Spain. We owe the Dutch. We owe the Netherlands. We owe a lot of people some money. And I just don't have time to deal with all the different states out there. So let me get somebody that's good in foreign affairs and foreign relations that can deal with it. Thomas Jefferson, he's a good guy. So he became the Secretary of State. So over time, as the country got bigger, the president needed more and more departments. Department of Education, Department of Veteran Affairs, Department of Native American Affairs or Indian Affairs or whatever. So as the country got bigger, the president needed more advisors. They're trying to bring it all back into the president. And how do I know that? The president, when it's italicized, That means the president alone. The president must set and enforce a plan for the executive branch. Sadly, however, a president today assumes office to find a sprawling federal bureaucracy that all too often is carrying out its own policy plans and preferences, or, worse yet, the policy plans and preferences of a radical, supposedly woke faction of the country. Again, they know they just can't fire all the people that don't agree with them. It's very hard to fire a civil service person, especially when they've gone past their probationary period. So what they're trying to do is say, hey, we understand that, hey, maybe all the departments got a lot of woke people serving in there. We need to bring it back to the White House because now we can control the agenda. Because maybe when we walk into the presidency, everybody in those other agencies may not fully agree with us. So we got to make sure we put people in place and make sure that the president alone can set those agendas. And if he can't, his people are on the same mindset as him to do it for him in his absence. Now here's the tricky part. Once they consolidate government back to the White House, the executive office of the president, once they get that in there, then they want that president to then send it back to the states, to the quote-unquote American people. The great challenge confronting a conservative president is the existential need for aggressive use of the vast powers of the executive branch to return power, including power currently held by the executive branch, to the American people. Now there's another tricky part to that, because once the president gets all that power, listen to this. Success in meeting that challenge will require a rare combination of boldness and self-denial. Boldness to bend or break the bureaucracy to the presidential will, and self-denial to use the bureaucratic machine to send power away from Washington and back to America's families, faith communities, local governments, and states. And what political party controls most of the state governments? I'll wait. The self-denial part is the scary part, because George Washington is one of the greatest people since Cincinnatus. You gotta look him up. He gave up power. When George Washington was the commander-in-chief, he gave it up. When he was president, he gave it up. He was always reluctant to have power. They're saying that the person that's gonna be next, Donald Trump or whomever, has to have self-denial to take all that power that's invested to him by the Constitution and gladly give it back to the states. How many people you know that's going to be like okay with taking that power and giving it up? Only a few special people in the world has done it. And you think Donald Trump or some conservative is going to say, hey, I got all this power and you want me to give it back to some bumpkin in Mississippi? No, I'm going to keep it.
He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
The correct title for Project 2025 is called Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise. It was originally published in 1981 around the time of the Reagan administration. And I think I found out why the conservative movement, the Heritage Foundation, MAGA, and everything Republican want to put Ronald Reagan on the Mount Rushmore of presidents. In the new Project 2025 mandate, Reagan was listed 70 times. I felt like I was at a GOP presidential primary.
Reagan, Reagan's, Reagan, Reagan, Reagan,
Reagan,
Reagan's, Reagan, Reagan's, Reagan.
And I guess they felt like they found a kindred spirit, because in the 2025 mandate, they say this: the conservative movement had found in Ronald Reagan a president who shared that vision and who had the will to go against the established political grain in Washington. He also had the ability to speak directly to the American people and convincingly show them how those ideas could work for the benefit of all. They felt like he was a Republican that they can really get behind. But that's not all. Here's the main reason why the conservatives and the Republicans and the Heritage Foundation and all those conservative groups, this is why they really love Ronald Reagan. Mandate's proven ideas and President Reagan's skill at communicating their benefits led to his administration implementing almost half of the recommendations by the end of his first year in office. Half within a year. And the man was there for 8 years. And I also got to mention that this is the first time I've ever heard white people say to another white person that he speaks so well, by him being known as the great communicator. Is it just me? And they're quick to label Reagan one of the Mount Rushmore of presidents. But let's just look at the numbers based on the unemployment rate from before he got in office until he left. Now, you know how everybody is always crapping on Jimmy Carter and his job approval rates and how everybody was struggling in the late 70s before Reagan took office? President Carter was in the office from 1977 until 1981, and it went from 6.4% up to 8.5% when he left office. When Reagan took office, it got to 10.8%. And by the time he left office in 1989, it got to 5.4%. He took it from, let's say, 8.5 down to 5.4. It took him an entire 8 years to get the unemployment rate down to 5.9%. And his policies were still bad because when George H.W. Bush took over after he left office, so let's go to 1989. 1989, it was 5.3. It went up to 6.3, 7.3, 7.4. By the time Clinton took office, it was 7.4 to 6.5. Bill Clinton got it down. Look at it. From 92, it was 7.4, 93, 6.5, 94, 5.5. It kept going down until the year 2000 when it got to 3.9%. Bill Clinton beat Reagan and H.W. Bush in the unemployment rate alone. So if any MAGA, if any conservative, if any Republican say anything about Reagan and about making America great again and about taking us back to Reagan years, is that what they're talking about?
If it was up to me, I would totally defund the FBI.
Project 2025 want to eliminate some offices in the FBI, thereby eliminating the separate feeling that the FBI has and thereby taking away its power and maybe even defunding the FBI in its entirety. This is especially true of the Federal Bureau of Investigations, FBI, a bloated, arrogant, increasingly lawless organization, especially at the top. The FBI views itself as an independent agency that is on par with the Attorney General, rather than as an agency that is under the Attorney General and fully accountable to him or her. To rein in this completely out of control bureau and remind it of its place within, rather than on top of the DOJ hierarchy, Hamilton writes that the FBI separate Office of the General Counsel with approximately 300 attorneys, separate Office of Legislative Affairs, and separate Office of Public Affairs should all be abolished.
What has to happen is, in a Republican majority, we have to defund and make cuts in the Department of Justice, and we can do that on how many employees they're allowed to have.
Requiring the FBI to get its legal advice from the wider department would serve as a crucial check on an agency that has recently pushed past legal boundary after legal boundary. Indeed, Hamilton writes, the next conservative administration should eliminate any offices within the FBI that it has the power to eliminate without any action from Congress. One of the reasons why they want to redo the White House Office Counsel is because they want the legal machinations to do what they want to do without Congress as much as possible. And if they can get rid of as much of the FBI as they can, they're going to do it. Because remember, they don't want the FBI in Donald Trump's business. And also because they don't know history. The FBI director serves for 10 years. The FBI director can be removed by the president, but he can't be removed by the president if that FBI director is investigating the president. When Trump fired his FBI director James Comey in 2018, that should have got Trump impeached alone, because Richard Nixon tried to do that as well. Look at the Saturday Night Massacre. The reason why the FBI director serves for 10 years is because of this. The House of Representatives has 2-year stints. The Senate has 6-year stints, but they go in thirds. So every 2 years, a third of the Senate is up for re-election. The president has 4 years, but can serve for 8. The reason why they put the FBI director at 10 is because J. Edgar Hoover, who was in charge of the FBI for over 50 years, he had so much power on presidents, he can dictate what they could and could not do. J. Edgar Hoover will go to a president and show them a file just like Project 2025 and say, look, Mr. President, this is what I have on you. You're going to let me do what I need to do out there on them streets, and you're going to stay out of it. And the president, knowing he didn't want that stuff out, would say, okay, cool, just leave my stuff alone. He had files on everybody. Malcolm X, MLK, JFK, RFK. He had files on everybody. To reduce the power of the office of the FBI director and the FBI director himself, they said that an FBI director can only serve for at least 10 years and that the FBI director can be removed by the president. The Project 2025 people and Trump and whomever you want to say that's in that realm don't understand that. And because of that, they want to reduce the FBI, and they assume that it does not fall under the DOJ, which it does, but they say put it back under the DOJ. But then they also want to reduce the DOJ and bring it back into the White House. Go back to my other videos about Project 2025 and how they're trying to consolidate government back into the White House so the White House can dictate what you can and cannot do. For instance, when the FBI says that it's investigating any collusion between a foreign government and a presidential campaign, mainly on the GOP side.
I have been authorized by the Department of Justice to confirm that the FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. And that includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts.
They don't want that.
Why did you fire Director Comey?
Because he wasn't doing a good job, very simply. He was not doing a good job. And one other thing I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states.
Now, Project 2025 is a consolidation of a lot of things that the Republican Party wants to do, and in particular, defunding the Department of Education. Schools should be responsive to parents rather than to leftist advocates intent on indoctrination. And the more the federal government is involved in education, the less responsive to parents the public schools will be. This department is an example of federal intrusion into a traditionally state and local realm. For the sake of American children, Congress should shutter it and return control of education to the states. And I agree. The federal government should not be involved in what is taught in public schools. But you have to get somebody involved to regulate the bullcrap that's going on in certain states.
The Times reporting on nearly a dozen Republican-led states seeking to ban or limit how the role of slavery and the pervasive effects of racism can be taught.
17 states now restrict teaching race in classrooms, especially in ways that make students feel discomfort, anguish, or guilt. Similar bans have been introduced in at least 25 other states.
Governor DeSantis is now also talking about his administration's decision to reject an advanced placement course focused on African American studies.
Knowledge is power. And one of the things that a lot of slave owners and a lot of people in America wanted to do was restrict knowledge from certain people. And in restricting that certain knowledge, if you don't know, it doesn't exist. If you don't know, you're ignorant to it, and the laws can be perverted and changed to fit a certain narrative. And if you don't know, and if you're not aware, then you think it's not going to affect you until it does. Just like most people are not reading Project 2025 published mandate. And to take African American studies out of schools, out of public education, they're basically telling you to forget. They don't want you to forget the Alamo. They don't want you to forget the Holocaust.
They are waiting for us to forget because in forgetting, we make possible the resurrection of these monsters. Never rest, never forget.
They don't want you to forget 9/11.
We'll always honor the heroes of 9/11. And here at this hallowed place, we pledge that we will never forget their sacrifice.
But they want you to forget slavery.
For 200 years ago, our grandfathers were slaves. Well, for God's sakes, did we have anything to do with that? I had no part in it. I had no slaves. My folks didn't. My grandparents didn't. Are they blaming us for what happened 3 years ago? Let's forget the past.
I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago for whom none of us currently living are responsible is a good idea.
Project 2025 has a very interesting view when it comes to Russia and China. And I know we've been going back and forth with Biden's for China and Trump's for Russia, but I want you to read in Project 2025 where the GOP, MAGA, conservative Republicans stand fully, where they've written down as a mandate on where they stand when it comes to China and Russia. The next president should use the State Department and its array of resources to reassess and lead this effort, just as it did during the Cold War. The U.S. government needs an Article X for China, and it should be a presidential mandate. Along with the National Security Council, the State Department should draft an Article X, which should be a deeply philosophical look at the China challenge. So what is Article X? Now here's an introduction about what Article X is. And while this source is taken from the Koch Foundation's Bill of Rights Institute, I don't support the Koch brothers at all. You gotta look them up. But this is a good brief synopsis of what Article X was. As the ashes of a devastated Europe were finally settling at the end of World War II, the ideological lines of the new conflict were being drawn. The Soviet Union and the United States had been able to set aside the differences to defeat fascism, but without a common enemy, they soon began to clash. Although some in the United States believed the West could cooperate with the Soviet Union, others argued that communism and capitalism were antitheses. George Kennan was a former service officer who studied Russia's history and policies. In 1947, he took a report he had developed in the Cold War for Secretary of State James Forrestal and published it in the Foreign Affairs under the pseudonym X. Now, George Kennan basically wrote the Cold War policy. That's what Article X was. It was the outline of containment for communism. And that became the Cold War. And the Cold War lasted for 44 years, from 1947 to the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. And in that timeline, we had countless wars and countless lives lost trying to contain communism. Do you think it worked? Because now we're working with communist countries when it comes to our economics and buying fuel and a lot of other stuff. So do you think the Cold War worked? Before the policy of containment was solidified in 1947, there was another time in American history where we tried to contain something where it lasted and it didn't end well. That was American slavery. People tried to contain slavery where it existed and did not want it to spread to the territories. That led to a civil war, along with a lot of other stuff too. It wasn't just containment. It was a lot of other stuff. As far as the ins and outs of containment with communism and American slavery, I'm writing an article on it and it's about to be published, so it'll be out soon, so don't worry about it. So we know on two separate occasions when it came to American history, chattel slavery and communism, containment does not work. And Project 2025 wants to use a containment style policy when it comes to China. Let's look at what they say about Russia. They offer 3 solutions when it comes to Russia. Now you can pause to read. They feel that some people believe this. They also believe some people believe this. And they also believe some people believe this. But listen to what they say. Regardless of viewpoints, the next conservative president has a generational opportunity to bring resolution to the foreign policy tensions within the movement and chart a new path forward that recognizes communist China as the defining threat to U.S. interests in the 21st century. That was Russia's policy. Go back. That was Russia. You were talking about Russia. What are you going to do about Russia? What you said was we got to establish something. We got a unique opportunity. We have a generational opportunity to say something about Russia, and you went to say that China was the enemy? Huh. Oh my God. So now we know for a fact where the Conservative Party stand. They stand with Mother Russia. As far as I'm aware, Biden and his administration doesn't have a policy where they're going to side with one country over the other when it comes to both China and Russia. They're just trying to have an amicable or an agreeable policy with both countries to keep the peace and just make money. They're trying to establish China as a threat, even though our economies are intertwined. The reason why China didn't call in their loans, and by the way, China doesn't own as much debt as you think they do. One of the countries that own more of our debt is Japan, not China. But the reason why they didn't call in their loans during the 2009 economic downturn is because when our system crashed, their system crashed economically. I'm getting carried away. Basically what I'm saying is Project 2025 establishes Russia to be more friendly with the United States than China. And if they're not right now, Their plan is to make that so. What do you think?